Eoin, how are you getting on?
Good, Adrian. How are things?
Flying it, thanks. You've been busying yourself up in Belfast, and I've really enjoyed your coverage from the various topics and various guests that you had over the last few days, and more of that to come. But it turns out you should have been at the opposite end of the country over the last few days. And big developments overnight for anybody who's just waking up. Good morning to you, first of all. Get the coffee in, because we've a busy one for you this morning. Some developing news, let's call it, from Cork last night on the situation around the playing of the Munster semi-final between Kerry and Cork. A statement from the players and the management last night on the Cork side saying, as players and management, our sole focus is on preparing and playing to the best of our ability next month in the Munster Championship, representing our families, our clubs and our county. We did not envisage needing to issue this statement. Cork and Kerry have long had an agreement in place to decide home and away fixtures. This year's fixture is a home game for Cork, as initially announced in a press release by Munster GAA on the 4th of March. We believe the decision made this week by Munster Council must be reversed. That decision, of course, was to move the game to Killarney because Ed Sheahan is playing in Páirc Uí Rinn and Páirc Uí Rinn is too low of an attendance. So the statement goes on, the decision to take the game to Killarney is driven by the financial benefits resulting from a larger crowd. We feel this reasoning sets a bad precedent. It is wrong and it goes against all the values of the Gaelic Athletic Association. As such, we are preparing for the Munster football semi-final on the 7th of May 2022 to be played in Páirc Uí Rinn. We will not be playing the match in any other venue. Regards, the Cork senior football players and management. That is a flex, if I have ever seen a flex, because they have just now sent this into overdrive, and it's a line in the sand from which you cannot come back. Somebody here is going to have to lose face. Somebody's going to have to give way, and it's hard to see it's going to have to be anybody other than Munster GAA.
This is officially a saga at this point, and it's been referred to as Páirc Uí Rinn or nowhere. I've got problems with that for two reasons. First of all, there's no alliteration there. Anybody who's got any better names for this, a catchier name than Páirc Uí Rinn or nowhere, please get in touch. And second of all, it's kind of similar to Newbridge or nowhere, but there's a lot of differences to Newbridge or nowhere. I was just looking back through the timeline of events this morning and going back through things chronologically, which kind of gives you a good sense of how things developed and how quickly things have developed this week. It's gone from saying it's a non-story would actually be giving it too much of credit in terms of how much people are talking about this. It's gone from something that was below a non-story to something that's blown up quite a bit this week. So if we go through the chronological events of Páirc Uí Rinn or nowhere, which is the current working title of the saga. So on February the 1st is when Cork GAA confirm the fixture moves. So the fixtures that were initially set for Páirc Uí Rinn. Cork versus Clare in hurling would move to Semple Stadium, and Cork versus Kerry in football would move to Páirc Uí Rinn. The decision was accompanied by a statement at the time. They say the relevant capacity will allow us to meet the demand for tickets from all Cork supporters, and that the management of both the hurling and football teams have been consulted throughout the process. The comprehensive fixture list for 2022 makes the best and most practical use available of facilities owned by Cork GAA during what will be an extremely busy period for Páirc Uí Rinn. After the Cork game against Limerick on the 17th of April in the hurling, the stadium switches to concert mode, they say, to facilitate the series of concerts by Ed Sheeran. Then there's nothing for a while. That was done and dusted. People were making plans to go to Páirc Uí Rinn, and that was that. What was interesting was that there were still obviously county board meetings happening that weren't being reported on. We didn't know the details. But Michael Moynihan had a good detail in a piece earlier this week where he said last month Kevin O'Donovan made the following comment in a county board meeting. For a semi-final this year, with Cork facing challenging times in football, a judgment call was made, and we said the team would have to come first in this one. Us sending a young team to Killarney after last year's result was considered, and I would be strongly of the view that Cork will be welcoming Kerry to Páirc Uí Rinn with all guns blazing. So this idea of moving the game to Killarney was considered before this week, and Cork GAA made a decision at that point. No, we want to play this game at home. Then March 24th, yesterday week, Kerry's Eye lead with a headline that says still TBC, and that's the first point when people are like, oh, hold on, what's going on here? On Sunday then, the Examiner are getting similar information. They say recent meetings of the Munster Council have strongly favoured moving the May 7th game to Kerry, with Cork likely to get an extra home game against Kerry in future provincial championships to compensate for losing a home game this year. And then more from the Examiner on Tuesday. They say an ability to address structural issues at Páirc Uí Rinn in time for Cork's clash with Kerry could see the game being moved to Fitzgerald Stadium. It is forecasted that remedial work required to ensure a capacity crowd at the grounds is unlikely to meet a deadline ahead of the fixture, and therefore a switch to Killarney is on the cards. They say Páirc Uí Rinn's previous capacity is below 11,400, but it could be even less due to safety restrictions. Munster GAA's Competition Control Committee are shortly expected to confirm the change of venue. They also say, as was the case when Páirc Uí Rinn was under construction, Cork's entitlement to a home game as per their home-away agreement with Kerry will be deferred, and therefore the following 2 provincial senior games between Kerry will be played in Páirc Uí Rinn, and that's exactly what happened. But there is more then. On Tuesday afternoon there was that letter that was sent from the Cork footballers to the county board. They call for consistency. They say, we have looked at several possible options: affirm the fixture for Páirc Uí Rinn, refuse to play in Killarney, refix the game in Páirc Uí Rinn for an alternative later date, temporarily scrap the home and away arrangement for 1 year and fix the game for a neutral venue, home and away to resume next year with a home game in Cork. It is important that we argue our case strongly. Munster cannot just change a venue with 6 weeks to go. So that was Tuesday when that letter was published anyway, when details of that letter were published by the Examiner between the footballers to the county board, imploring them to dig their heels in and ask for Páirc Uí Rinn. But as we know, Wednesday and then, of course, and say yesterday morning, the news develops that Munster GAA confirmed the game will be moved from Páirc Uí Rinn to Killarney. And then, as you say, last night's statement kind of is a little bit of a nuclear moment on this. They said that Cork and Kerry have long had an arrangement in place to decide home and away fixtures, and on the statement goes, we believe the decision must be reversed. They also said the decision to take the game to Killarney is driven by financial benefits resulting from a larger crowd. So that is where we stand at the moment. Something's got to give if that fixture is going to take place on May the 7th, I suspect.
Something absolutely has to give, and loads of name suggestions coming in as to what we should call it. We'll come to those in a few minutes. If you've got any ideas, lash them into us. The idea that the players are talking about it being a purely financial play, of course it is. Like, I don't think anybody's trying to dress it up as anything else. Like, the statement says that it goes against the values of the GAA. Like, it was just over a year ago that Tom Ryan, I have a sense that he was down in Cork at that time, but I remember the statement where he was talking about Cork GAA being in debt to the tune of €31.5 million. That 20 million of that was going to run over the long term. That's the context to what's happening here. Like, I think if Cork GAA was operating on a basis of an even keel, that the accounts were in good order, I think there'd be more of a conversation to be had here. That's the context to it. It's their own county board, I suppose. Like, look, it's not that that's of the players making or really of huge interest to the players, but neither can you be blind to the fact that there's at least 20 million sitting over here that needs to be addressed, and that ain't going away unless you bring Ed Sheeran in this year and Ed Sheeran version 2 in next year, which is an interesting, I think, subcontext to all of this, because, like, look, you'd start to get the calculator out and start running the maths on it. If it does move to Killarney, we were chatting about it before we came on air, the collective wisdom is that Killarney is, what, 30,000
30-ish, yeah.
capacity, that there might be 20,000 at it, which is another story, by the way, but maybe for another day. Let's say you got 20,000 at it, which would be roughly about double what you'd be getting if the game's at Páirc Uí Rinn, which is an extra revenue of about €200,000. That's what you're leaving behind you here. And like, look, you know, if everybody decides that that's money we're happy to leave behind, we're getting plenty from the Ed Sheeran thing, then collectively that's what they do. But I think in the context of having 20 million at least debt sitting over here in the bank, how do you turn your nose up at 200 grand?
Yeah, like, and people will argue that there is a situation where Páirc Uí Rinn could potentially get to as big as 14,000 for this fixture if all these safety protocols are passed and they manage to get even extra room. And on that same side of that argument would be people saying they barely get 17,000 in Killarney. So there is an argument out there that the difference may be negligible. I'd argue that a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. One is definitely bigger than the other, and there is a fact out here that Cork will get a game back in Páirc Uí Rinn, so the money won't be lost forever, it'll come back. But that is of no importance to the football team and management, who want to win right here, right now, when they feel they have the best chance of doing that at Páirc Uí Rinn. What I find interesting is that when you go back through these details, is that Cork GAA have made no bones about this. I mean, they've referred to it as concert mode, the way the stadium will go. They need to do this. They've been straight up about this. They know they made a decision to allow these concerts in, and they made a decision to have the footballers play in Páirc Uí Rinn. And as I say, up until last week, nobody had that big of an issue with it. So it is interesting that this has blown up so quickly. You would have to have a bit of sympathy for people involved in Cork with this.
It's the reason that it's not, for me, Cork, Newbridge are nowhere, in the sense that like they are going to get 2 home games back-to-back years running after this.
Yeah, like
So
there was no home away agreement with Mayo and Kildare for obvious reasons.
But nobody's taking that away. Nobody's saying
Exactly,
we're definitely taking this advantage from you. They're saying that literally we need to do this year to address these debts. It does raise a question about what happens when, you know, Ed Sheeran's promoters or whoever it is come knocking next year and say, hey, we'd like to rent out Páirc Uí Rinn, and the hundreds of thousands that are going to come in the context of that. Cork GAA are now saying that, you know, even if that clashes with a fixture, we're not going to take that, or else we'll put it at Páirc Uí Rinn. So they're sort of kicking that. There is a bit of a can kicker down the road there. You know, if the logic applies in 2022, then surely it applies next year, and it applies the year after. But I mean, this statement obviously at least forces some clarity in that regard. You know, they're saying that if this happens again next year, then we'll turn that money down.
Yeah, like Ed Sheeran ad's second Cork date was announced on 25th of September last year. Draw for 2022 Munster Senior Football Championship was the 27th of November last year. Like there is that was fixed before the fixtures were set in stone. You obviously would have known that around early May time you would have had fixtures because the early season would have been in place. There is something of a perfect storm about it though, that this is year 1 of an earlier calendar, and that next year everybody will probably be a little bit better prepared for this. I think that there will be I think people will probably learn a thing or two from this and get more of a relationship will build up between the dates and the rhythms of the new GAA calendar as time goes, because early May traditionally would have been totally fine for a concert in Cork. Absolutely no issue. It's June, July that would have been the issue. So like I don't foresee there being many issues down the line from this, but it's here and now where things are going to be very interesting. Munster GAA, will they be stubborn? Will they want to try and save face a little bit on this? And what I suspect will happen here is that Munster GAA will go to Kerry maybe and say, what do you want to do? Which
the Kingmakers,
which is completely ridiculous, really. I don't think they've got any.
Kerry not just in a position where they have to be just told really what they're going to do. I'm speculating there. Maybe not. Maybe there's no consultation with them whatsoever. They'll play what
wherever.
choice do they have, sort of thing. Like, I mean, because the game is supposed to be in Cork, so ultimately if Kerry get told they're going to Cork, then they have to go no matter where that is. And then equally, I don't know if there's any financial benefit. There must be something. And the home advantage.
The one thing I would say is that, like last year, the GAA could have said to Kerry, listen, you're playing this game against Tyrone here. Oh, Tyrone got COVID, you're playing the game against here. But what actually happened was Kerry made representations, and they kind of got involved and said, listen, we will absolutely move to whatever happens here. And maybe they could have kept their powder dry a little bit more, and maybe that's based on the results of what actually happened that day. I wonder, is there going to be a little bit of an administrative hangover from what happened last summer when it comes to their part in all this? Again, I'm not sure.
I do think again
it's just something
slightly different.
That crossed my mind.
I think the Kerry
it's completely different.
They ultimately, because of the context of what's going on, they sort of have to do what they're told.
And listen, they will absolutely happily go down to Páirc Uí Rinn and play that game, because nobody was kicking up a fuss before last week. I presume
you're sitting back going, happy days. This is just a little. It's a Cork. There's nothing better. There's nothing more volcanic than Cork versus Cork, which is ultimately what this is.
Yeah, possibly. I definitely think it's Cork versus Munster GAA. I think that's the main beef here. I think it's one of your blue ribbon teams. You know, it's the second biggest team that represents your county. I think that I would say that the Cork executive and the footballers would be very much on the same side. If there's a little few wrinkles to iron out here and there, I think they'll probably figure that out. I think it's very much all hands on deck to try and reverse the Munster GAA decision as opposed to anything else at this point.
Going to have lots more chat about this over the course of the morning, lots more reaction to it as well. The rebellion at the ring, says Brian Dillion, which I like. Cork or curtains was what I've come up with. You have that? It's Cork or commerce, says David on YouTube.
Yeah, I like it.
The Sheahan saga, the Munster Council ring bing, which is like a subtitle there from Shawnee Riley. It's ring or reward, says David as well on YouTube.
Should we put that up on an OTB poll there? Put up the three best options and get people to reply with their suggestions.